10K into the race, like people started to drop out. 20K into the race, more people dropped out. All of a sudden, like at 30K, so like 18-ish miles, like I'm the last person in the race that still hasn't finished the race. And there's this little like Mercedes truck behind me, and it's like two guys in it, and they just want to go home. And so they're just yelling out the window like, "Hey man, you're never going to make it."
Welcome to Spartan Trail on Spartan Up with your host, Mauri Pagliacci.
Welcome to the Spartan Trail section of the Spartan Up podcast, where we're going to be talking all about trail running and ultra running, but from a rough patches point of view. We're going to be talking about those dark places where you can go running from a 10K on the trails, from 100 miles anywhere in the mountains of the world. And for this first episode, we're going to have Mike Wardian, the one and only.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Lumen Metabolism Tracker, the first device to track your metabolism and provide daily personalized nutrition plans for peak performance. Visit lumen.me to order and use the code Spartan50 for $50 off.
Well, welcome, Mike. It's great to have you in our first episode.
Oh my gosh, it's such an honor to be included and a chance to talk about one of my favorite topics about, what to do when things don't go the way you want, and, how to try to rectify your race or get yourself back to where you want to be.
Everybody tells the joys of trail running. Everybody tells the beautiful landscapes and how amazing it is to be running outside with friends. But nobody tells you that you can be in really, really dark places sometimes. Like when things don't go, like this is the best case scenario. Everything goes right. You start the race, finish the race. Beautiful picture in the mountains. But sometimes that doesn't work. And I think you can really talk about it. But I don't want to go like right away on the 100-miler thing, like the dark place in 100-miler. So I just want to hear what's your worst, probably the worst, or just a really bad experience running a shorter distance, and how you got through it. Like, there's probably a marathon that went wrong, a half marathon that you say, okay, I'm gonna bang this, and it didn't work. So I'm all ears.
Yeah, I actually two just came to mind. One was I ran in 3 Olympic trials for the U.S. Olympic trials. So I have a personal best in the marathon of 2:17:49. But this was my first time going to do a preview of the Olympic trials course in 2003. And somehow I came down with like a stomach bug leading up into the race. And so it was only like 40 people in the race. It was at the Mercedes Marathon in Birmingham, Alabama. And so I was like sweating in my hotel room. I couldn't even like get dinner the night before. I like had cold sweats. Like I sweated through like all my clothes, the sheets, like everything. And so
like the
I was
Michael
like,
Jordan pizza, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I like when he hits the game winner and he like pushes the guy out of the way. But yeah, like kind of like that. And so I was like, well, I'm here. I'm just gonna do the race. And so I started the race. And again, it was only like a 40-person field. And so I was running. I had run like 2:22 or something up to that point, which is about 5 minutes and 25 seconds per mile pace. But I was running more like closer to 6-minute pace, just because I felt so sick. And so it was interesting, like, 10K into the race, like people started to drop out. 20K into the race, more people dropped out. All of a sudden, like at 30K, so like 18-ish miles, like I'm the last person in the race that still hasn't finished the race. And there's this little like Mercedes truck behind me, and it's like two guys in it, and they just want to go home. And so they're just yelling out the window like, "Hey man, you're never going to make it." And I'm like, "I know." And they're like, "You should just quit." And it was like a cold day, and I was like freezing and like shaking, and like you could just see how like much distress I was in. And they're just like the whole time just like driving, heckling me like, "Just get in the car, man, we can call it." And I ended up just being like, nope, I started this, I'm gonna finish it. And I think sometimes even if it's not going the way you want, I think that if you can just put your head down and just get to the start line, you can make something happen. Obviously, I didn't have the race I wanted. I didn't have a good day. Like it wasn't a fun experience, but it did lead me to be able to draw on that going forward. And so it was one of those things where I always knew, like, hey, if things are really bad, I can keep going. And, if people are, trying to get you to, maybe reconsider what you're doing, if you know that you're not hurting yourself and, it's just a matter of like, hey, suck it up and get through this, then I was able to draw on that quite a bit going forward, which has been nice. Because the second story was at the San Francisco Marathon, I went out with my buddy the day before, and like one of the things like you always hear before a race is like, don't do anything crazy, don't eat anything you've never eaten before. But it's really hard because you're usually in somewhere cool and you're like, hey, I'm in Thailand, or you're in China, or you're in, San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco with a buddy.
Yeah. And you're like, hey, I want to go and check out like the Italian area, or I wanted to go check out this Indian burrito place. And so like the day before the race, my buddy's like, no, man, in Mill Valley, there's the incredible burrito place. And I was like, I don't know, it doesn't sound like a good idea, but I was like, hey, whatever, I'll just go. And I was like, worst case, my stomach will be a little upset. But I knew I was really fit, and I was like, fine, whatever. And so I ate an Indian burrito, and I swear, like immediately I felt bad. And I was like, oh, this is a bad mistake. And I continued to feel bad, like didn't sleep the entire night, spent the night in the bathroom, like next to the toilet, just curled up in a ball.
Up and down, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I was like, hey, I'm here. I'm going to start the race. And I think like most people just would have just been like, no, I'm good. Like I'll just, I'll just try again another time. And what was so cool was like, I felt terrible at the beginning of the race. And by like halfway, I started to feel better. I was like taking in fluids. I actually like ran a little bit slower. And so by like 20 miles, all of a sudden I was in like second place. And then all of a sudden at like 23 miles, I like caught the guy in first place. And I was like, oh my God, I think I might actually win this race. And so then, the next couple miles, I put like 20 or 30 seconds into the guy and ended up winning the race. And so like, again, I think that just speaks to like, sometimes it's like just making yourself go out and try. And I feel like so many times in life, it's just, taking that first step. And again, it's not completely awesome, like when that happens, but sometimes you can just get through it by just persevering and just going and showing up. And it's, I think a lot of the lessons in most things in life is like half the battle is just getting there, right? Like putting yourself in a good position, and then, things can kind of work out.
Awesome. I'm just getting from those beautiful anecdotes. It's you're mostly having like stomach issues, right? Like for both of them, it ended up being like a stomach bag or a miracle burrito that ended up being a miracle burrito. But there is something. So food is key. Like what you eat before or during the race is something key for a runner. So let's focus a bit on that. And you said that at some point of the race in San Francisco, you were able to get in fluids again. But how do you try that? Like, how do you realize that you're able to start eating or drinking again? And what does your body tell you? What can you feel about your body that you can start trying again? And what do you try? Like, because I feel I'm sure you're not trying to eat like a full bomb gel like right away when you start feeling okay, right?
No, exactly. Like actually, there's a couple tricks for that. So like, I have probably one more story that's actually pretty applicable to this. I did a race in Poland. It was an ultra trail race, so 100 kilometers. And the night before, I started feeling bad, and I was like, this is really weird. Like I didn't eat anything weird. Like I totally like had learned my lesson from the Indian burrito. It was like super plain, like nothing. I actually brought a lot of food from home. And I just couldn't figure out why I wasn't feeling great. And the race starts, and it starts at like midnight. So like, you know, and we're running through the middle of the night. It's cold. Like I'm trying to drink, like you don't really need a lot of fluid at that point, but I'm like, you know, drinking and eating, and I'm just feeling worse and worse. And like, eventually it was one of those things where I just started cutting out everything I was doing. So I stopped eating gels, I stopped eating everything, and I was just drinking water, and I was still feeling like worse and worse. And eventually, like halfway through the race, I realized the water was making me sick because of the mineral content. It was like this fancy like spa water.
Yeah, we don't want to call the brand, but it's like the model water from Zoolander, right?
It was like this awesome, like, you know, probably like $20 a bottle of water that the race had gotten donated. And so it was at all the aid stations and everything. And so then I switched to soda, and I felt great. And I ended up finishing like third or fourth, you know? So like I was able to pick back up, but I was probably in like 100th place or something. And it was one of those things where you kind of like, and I think the moral of that story and like what you're talking about is sometimes it just takes like eliminating stuff, or like what I did in San Francisco, and I've done a lot of times, is sometimes if you just put the water in your mouth and swish it around, you still get some of the hydration, and it doesn't mess with your stomach as much.
Yeah.
So you can do that, or you can chew on ice if you actually have that, if you have like the ability, if you have like a crew. That's another good thing. And then obviously if you're going to do some kind of like sports drink or something like that, you can really dilute that. So like you can cut it. So like if you buy like a Gatorade at the store, like I use like a product called Goo Roxane, but like, you know, something like that. And you can just make it a lot less sweet and a lot less intense by like cutting it with water, as long as the water's not mineral water.
Yeah, not crazy water.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. There's something also, I'll just stick to food and nutrition. But there's also something that maybe for someone who's new, they'll just get their isotonic and just drink it right away and probably feels really bad. And you just said it. But so one of the trick is just cutting it with water. But what else do you think there's something that people should be taking in count, like getting ready for a race? Is like, so if you don't do this, or like this could happen to you. Look, I ended up almost puking, or I ended up like suffering for 20-ish miles. These little tricks can help you, like the water, cutting the isotonic, or
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think those are some of the tricks. I mean, I think one of the biggest tricks that I've learned, or hacks, is making sure you have something that works almost no matter what. So like, and make sure that you bring your own stuff. So if you're going to, you know, the London Marathon, or you're going to the Spartan Trail World Championships in Tahoe, and they have something on the course, like don't think that it's going to work for you unless you've been able to try it ahead of time. And that's the other thing I'd recommend. If you can find out, like do a little bit of research and find out what they're going to have on the course, how much, and then bring your own stuff anyhow. And so if you don't need it, like if everything works for you that they have, cool, then you just have to carry a little bit extra weight. But if they don't have something that works for you, you always have something that you can use. And then also have it somewhere, like most of the time if you're going to run on trail, you're going to have a vest or like a backpack. Make sure you have it somewhere where it's easy to get, so when you get tired, you don't have to go in the back or take off your sack. So if you can have it in the front pockets, so it's handy. I feel like that's a big deal, because the more tired you get, the less you want to do anything, and you're just like, oh, it's only 5 miles, but it's 5 miles up the side of a mountain that's going to take like 4 hours, especially if you don't eat. So like the other thing is, and I know when I was moving from the shorter distances to the longer distances, I just couldn't, like I could just slam gels. I would take like 60 gels in like 100K. Whoa. Like I would just bring a box of gels, and that was like all I would use.
Damn it. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. It was crazy, man. Like the guys would just be like, what? And I would make them all the same, so there was no deviation. They would all just be exactly the same, because it wouldn't be like, I don't feel like, grape, or I don't feel like strawberry or whatever.
Yeah.
And that worked for like 12 hours, but anything over 12 hours, I would just get sick to my stomach. And so like, I'd say the biggest thing now is like having some variety and like some stuff that, that's super simple. Like I use like avocado and salt, or, like you're saying, like an isotonic that I know works, and I'll just carry like little Ziploc bags of it. So, kind of look like a drug dealer, but I mean, it's just,
but
like
that's fine.
powder.
It's allowed. It's allowed. Nobody's going to tell you
totally,
anything.
Awesome. But it is funny when you're like traveling to a race with like, it looks like you have like a big kilo, but it's just your powder,
Yeah. It's just whatever.
So I have got
proteins.
Stopped before for that. Yeah. No, I've totally gotten like the customs officials like, come here, sir.
Yeah. What is this?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Lumen Metabolism Tracker, the first device to track your metabolism and provide daily, personalized nutrition plans for peak performance. Visit lumen.me to order and use the code Spartan50 for $50 off.